feeling. Listen to these words of Swamiji on security. Man struggles all his life to store up treasures for himself, to ensure his property against loss and his health against the devastations of disease. He rests his faith in outward measures and sees not that such faith is like asking a wave not to move. Security is his alone, whose faith rests in the Lord. Most practical of men is he who offers his life to God, praying, "My safety is thy responsibility, Lord." This does not mean we should not be conscientious, but after doing our very best, we should leave the worrying to God. And now let's affirm together. I live in the fortress of God's inner presence.
I live in the fortress of God's inner presence.
Nothing and no one
Nothing and no
can
one
break through these walls and harm me.
can break through these walls and harm me.
I live in the fortress of God's inner presence.
I live in the fortress of God's inner presence.
Nothing and no one
Nothing and no
can
one
break through these walls and harm me. I live in the fortress of God's inner presence.
I live in the fortress of God's inner presence.
Nothing and no one
Nothing and no one
can break through these walls and harm me.
can break through these walls and harm me.
And now in a whisper with deep concentration, I live in the fortress of God's inner presence.
I live in the fortress of God's inner presence.
Nothing and no one
Nothing and no one
can break through these walls and harm me.
can break through these walls and harm me.
And now silently, at the point between the eyebrows, I live in the fortress of God's inner presence. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me. I live in the fortress of God's inner presence. Nothing and no one can break through these walls and harm me. And please pray silently with me. I accept whatever comes, Lord, as coming from thy hands. I know that it comes in blessing, for I am thine as thou art ever mine. Om Shanti.
Well, good morning to everyone. Welcome to Ananda and to all those online. You know, Yogananda said that in time, America and India would lead the world. Obviously, India with its spirituality, America with its material efficiency. And I don't think it's any coincidence. Here we are in India. Independence Day is right around the corner, and we just experienced that as well in America, July 4th. And so, again, I was sharing with a friend, Babaji wanted to leave at one point, and his sister tricked him, as we read in the autobiography of a yogi, and he stayed. And he didn't just stay for a month or for a year. He said, I'll be staying for a long time. Paraphrasing, we are in good shape because the masters are running the show. But this blend of East and West, it's incredibly fascinating and very inspiring. But again, thank you, India, the guru of the world. So we have a reading from Whispers from Eternity entitled, Save Me from Shipwreck on My Ocean of Dreams. I was shipwrecked on the storm-tossed ocean of mere dreams. My vessel of happiness was shattered utterly. Struggling, I tried to swim through those tossing waves of sadness and suffering. Then suddenly, a little raft of hope, wafted to me by thy winds of mercy, came floating to me. I grasped it and held on. Little by little, floating thereon, I touched at last upon the golden isle of peaceful silence. Nymphs of thy blessing met me and took me to thy safe presence of eternal reassurance, beyond all waves of false rising hopes and crashing disappointments. And from the autobiography of a yogi, that incredible story, incredible chapter 2, Penniless Boys of Vrindavan. A little introduction. Yogananda described his father as a very strict disciplinarian. But his elder brother, he said, his discipline was nothing short of drastic. And there you have it. And so his father, Yogananda's father and his brother were doing all that they could to see if they could marry him off, and tried a number of times. And even the last time, I mean, they really went to great ends by basically putting the whole thing together and saying, okay, you're getting married. And he said, no way, but I don't want to disappoint you. I know you've all come for a feast. And so he asked his cousin brother to, again, be married, as it turned out, to a beautiful woman, and he was absolutely fine and enchanted with that. And so Yogananda was off the hook. So during this time too, they again were relentless, especially Ananda, and they were doing everything they could to bring him back to Kolkata. And when it turned out that he left the Benares ashram, where he was studying with Dayananda, Swami Dayananda, and others, Ananda was so happy because he figured, okay, great. No doubt he gave it a try. It was a bust. It didn't work, and he's coming back. And so he was really pouring it on in terms of trying to convince Yogananda again to lead a regular life, a normal life, not the life of a monastic. And so here we go. This is Ananta. So you feel quite independent of Father's will. Ananta's gaze was innocent as he resumed the barbs of yesterday's conversation. I am conscious of my dependence on God. Words are cheap. Life has shielded you thus far. What a plight if you were forced to look to the invisible hand for your food and shelter. You would soon be begging on the streets. Never. I would not put faith in passers-by rather than God. He can devise for his devotee 1,000 resources besides the begging bowl. More rhetoric. Suppose I suggest that your vaunted philosophy be put to a test in this tangible world. I would agree. Do you confine God to a speculative world? We shall see. Today, you shall have opportunity either to enlarge or to confirm my own views. Ananta paused for a dramatic moment, then spoke slowly and seriously. I propose that I send you and your fellow disciple Jitendra this morning to the nearby city of Vrindavan. You must not take a single rupee. You must not beg, either for food or money. You must not reveal your predicament to anyone. You must not go without your meals, and you must not be stranded in Vrindavan. If you return to my bungalow here before 12 o'clock tonight without having broken any rule of the test, I shall be the most astonished man in Agra. And it goes on. Midnight was approaching. They have had an incredible, this chapter is really quite amazing, incredible experience there in Vrindavan, where, for starters, they were again ushered into a feast because the two princes were unable to come. And they had met these fellows on the train. And Yogananda, because he was full of mischief, as the masters are when these two people approach them on the train, and try to coax them, to this ashram. Yogananda was, a bit rude to them. Don't bother us, and so forth. But these two were very insistent, and they went. And the meal was 30 courses. It was something that one, of course, would never forget, especially them. And then after that, if that wasn't enough, then there was another who came when they arrived in Vrindavan. And he had a vision of Master as his guru. And so when he saw those two again, Yogananda rebuffed him. Said, don't bother us. And this fellow was very insistent. And again, toured them around Vrindavan. Again, Yogananda initiated him into Kriya at the very end. and gave them, food, money, all of that. And so here it is. Midnight was approaching. The two Cinderellas, sent forth penniless, entered Ananda's bedroom. His face, as he had promised, was a study in astonishment. Silently, I showered the table with rupees. Jatindra, the truth. Ananda's tone was jocular. Has not this youngster been staging a hold-up? But as the tale was unfolded, my brother turned sober and then solemn. The law of demand and supply reaches into subtler realms than I had supposed. Ananda spoke with a spiritual enthusiasm never before noticeable. I understand for the first time your indifference to the vaults and vulgar accumulations of the world. Late as it was, my brother insisted that he receive Diksha into Kriya Yoga. The Guru Mukunda had to shoulder the responsibility for two unsought disciples in one day. Swami, too, had an incredible story in the early 60s. It was 1962. When he left the ashram there, he was thrown out, and he did not know what to do. He did not know what to do because he was still a young man. He was in his mid-30s. He had had no experience in the world. He had come to Yogananda at a very tender age of 22. And now, as it worked out, God does everything for the best, but it was a very, very severe test for him. And as I believe I shared earlier, in earlier satsangs, when Anandamoyi Ma heard of this, and Swami Kriyananda and Anandamoyi Ma were very close, she said, take this as the Guru's grace. And Swami said, this is one thing I cannot do. Because he felt that Yogananda had abandoned him. He couldn't even listen to his voice. So it was a time of incredible trial. And it was about 3 years until he found his footing. And it happened seemingly by chance. Of course, we know that wasn't the case, with Divine Mother's hand in everything in our lives and so forth. He was asked by Haridas Chaudhry, who was in charge of an ashram in San Francisco, to speak there. And Swami Kriyananda said, what would I share? My life is joyless. What would I share with him? And he was, again, as vice president of Self-Realization Fellowship, before he left and so forth, he was the main speaker. He traveled all around the world. He was a seasoned orator. And yet, what would he share? There was no joy. And yet, this fellow, and then Divine Mother through Haridas Chaudhry, was very insistent. And he didn't even know who he was speaking to at one point. He thought he was Donald Walters. Swami was staying at his parents' home in Atherton in Northern California. And when he found out he was Swami Kriyananda, he said, Swami Kriyananda? He had no idea it was him. And again, he became so insistent. So finally, Swami thought, okay, fine, I'll go and speak. And what was his surprise? Surprise is hardly the word. When people came up to him after his talk and said, I felt so much joy coming through you. And he thought, did they attend another lecture? What is this? And yet he had to acknowledge that there was an undercurrent of joy, fruit of Kriya, the fruit of meditation, the fruit of discipleship, that had never left him. And bit by bit, he began to piece together his life until he found the property in 1967. Ananda again celebrated not so long ago, 50th anniversary, 1968. Swami formed a retreat and so forth. And he realized that this was something that he was being asked to do by his guru. Yes, his guru had said that his work was to lecture and to edit and so forth. Yogananda hadn't said to him, though he had said that he had a great work to do, he hadn't talked about community, although Yogananda was incredibly enthusiastic about spiritual community. And Swami was too, because even at the tender age of 15, he had this interest in community, and he would talk to all his friends about that and impart his inspiration and enthusiasm. And his friends were enthusiastic too until they found out how serious he was, and then they all left because they considered it impossible. And even when Swami Kriyananda started, and this was the community movement in the States in the late 60s, no one thought he would succeed. And yet it didn't matter to him. Why? Because he was just there serving his guru. If his guru wanted to have Ananda succeed, then he would have to do it through him. And he said, Ananda, to this day, has been built through a series of miracles. And we see that again on an ongoing basis in our own lives in so many ways, as sometimes people are concerned about, are they growing spiritually? And I like to encourage them by saying, you want a miracle? You're on the spiritual path. Of course, everyone's on the spiritual path, but you're practicing. So you want to know if you're growing spiritually? You are experiencing a miracle every single time that you bring your thoughts back to center, back to God. Every single time you do some act of seva, every time you smile and encourage someone by lifting their vibration, you're wondering if you're growing spiritually? With the 6 billion people that are on this planet that are indifferent, even here in India, are indifferent to the spiritual path? Because right now, again, as I like to say, there are kids in the candy shop and they're enjoying all of the sweets. They don't want to take on, this, what they consider a daunting challenge of having both an outer life, which is keeping them plenty busy, and an inner life, not knowing perhaps that they two work so well together. That becomes the joy of our life when we become integrated and balanced. Swami said too that the founding of communities in time, we have more, than half a dozen communities worldwide, both rural and in the city. He said because Ananda has been established in now 50 years, it's going to be much easier to have community. Well, I sometimes scratch my head and I wonder, what did he mean by easier? It's still a huge project, whether we're growing a meditation group or a center or a colony. It's a big job, and one has to rely on miracles. One has to expect miracles in order to, again, grow both inwardly and to do all that we can to serve God and the great ones outwardly. It's a big, big project. It takes a tremendous commitment. And so when we think of what it is in this very insecure world, we don't know what's going to be happening tomorrow. It's such a crazy time. But remember that we have chosen to incarnate on this particular planet because this planet, a Rajasic planet, is known to be a challenging experience. And we could all come up here and share our stories about the challenges that we have in dealing with all that we face on an outward level, and of course all that we face inwardly. But this is because those who have been drawn to this earth plane are yearning to accelerate their growth spiritually. That's all of us. And that is what we want. That's why we have been born, to come down here and see what we can do to discharge our karma, if at all possible, and it is possible, in this lifetime. Be done with it. Swami just recently, in a questions and answer series, I love his questions and answers on YouTube, and they're all over the place. This one was in Kolkata, because of course he traveled widely. And he said basically, when the guru arrives in our lives, and when we're able to embrace the guru-disciple relationship especially, then we're pretty much done. This incarnation and a few incarnations, we were talking this morning about that. And so for us, it's a matter of, again, doing what we can to feel secure that we are now at the feet of the guru. Many times I have found when perhaps I'm a little upset with someone, and I think, well, gee, you know something? They too are at the feet of the guru shedding tears of yearning. You should be upset about this trifle. ridiculous. Put your mind and your energy somewhere else, because these are committed souls. Again, everyone's on the spiritual path, but who wants to actually dive deep? Who wants to do what they can to use opportunity after opportunity, which is every moment, to break to the right, which is to choose the positive and to thrust out the negative, worry, all of the things that come and create excitement for us. Swami, when he was at Lake Shrine, they were just founding that beautiful property in Southern California by the ocean. There were gnats. And Swami said to Master, why in this incredible place with this beautiful vibration are these nuisances? And Master smiled sweetly, says, well, this is the way that God is always giving us the incentive to move forward. And so all of these things that come our way, the busy mind, the things that we face perhaps with our relatives, Yogananda said that oftentimes the relatives are here to test us. And we know that. If it's not the mother or the father or the siblings, then it's maybe, some cousin or something. I had a cousin, I'm half Jewish, her name was Celia. And she was like, we used to tease about 42nd cousins removed. In other words, a very, very distant cousin. Well, one time she said, I'm going to Jerusalem. Well, Jerusalem is, of course, a place where there's enormous power. The presence of Christ is felt so strongly there. So we are so anxious when she came back to hear what she had said, what she had experienced. So what did she say? Celia, how was Jerusalem? Just a bunch of rocks. Just a bunch of rocks. Oh my God, sorry we asked. With an opportunity like that, with the vibration welling up from the ground. One time Swami was on the bus, he was also in Jerusalem with a bunch of tourists, as it turned out. And so he said to one of them that was sitting next to him, you can feel the power of Christ so strongly. It's like you could see him walk right out of the hills. This man did not know what to think about this comment. So all he could say was, wonderful history, wonderful history. Oh, okay, that's true. But you're sitting next to a saint who just gave you a window, a door to experience something, not like Cousin Celia, just a bunch of rocks, to experiencing something very deep. And your comment is wonderful history, wonderful history. Oh, well, we are all doing as good as we can for where we're at. That's what Swami Kriyananda said one time to Jyotish and Devi, who were having trouble. He said, you're doing as good as you can. This was many years ago. Doing as good as you can for where you're at. And their job has always been a very challenging one as the spiritual directors and working so closely with Swami. And then Swami, after saying that, said, and I'm also doing as good as I can for where I'm at. It's about 40 years ago. And I've always appreciated that. So we should appreciate on a deep level where we are at this point in time, and of course, where everyone is, whether it's our brother and sister disciples or people that are passing in the street. Okay.
So before, we used to only do one talk, but we felt that we've been gone for so long that now both of us have to speak. Just so thank you, Haridas. The topic is on security today, and that passage from the AY was perfect because so many of us feel that first of all we have to get our lives together, then we will find God, forgetting that God is the one that gave us our life, and that we wouldn't even be here or able to take one breath if it wasn't for God. And so we have deluded ourselves into thinking that we have to be responsible human beings, take care of what's in front of us, and God will come later. And we forget He's the very essence, the very grace, the very meaning of what we're here to do. We forget that. We haven't been trained as young children even to remember that. We've been trained to, you've got to get to school, you've got to get the degree, you've got to get married, you've got to raise your children, you've got to raise your grandchildren, you've got to do this, do this, do this. Very rarely does a parent say, you have to find God in this life. And all of these things will be added onto you. Why do we read the scriptures? Why do we meditate? Why do we do Kriya? Why do we have a guru? Why do we have a spiritual life? It's so that we can have that joy that Hari was talking about, this underlying joy that colors all of the things that we have to do. It's just karma. We're just working out our karma. We've put things into action and into place in the past, and now we're having to work it out. But what a wonderful thing to work it out with God. And I think there's a little bit of a fear. If I give my life to God, he's going to ask me to give something up. He's going to ask me to do something I'm not ready to do. He's going to make it hard for me. There's that fear because he doesn't give us the plan ahead of time. He doesn't say, if you love me, then I will give you this and this and this, and you'll pass this test, and then you can have that. It doesn't work that way. What he asks us to do is to love him completely, to trust him completely, to give our lives to him completely, and then serve him with love. And then all these things will be added onto you. It takes faith, it takes courage, spiritual courage to put God first. We think we need to know ahead of time. You know, when we first started Ananda, it was such an amazing thing because there was nothing literally at Ananda Village, nothing. And now this work is spread all over the world, all over the world. Jyotish and Devi are in Assisi now, giving talks to hundreds. Look at all the different centers and the communities that have sprung up in India. Look at that. Look at our center here in Bangalore. None of that would have happened. There was nothing here if each individual soul that came to Ananda in the early years, and if Swamiji hadn't said yes, hadn't said, I will help you, I will do this. I want to find God in my life. I want God. Many people came and left the community over the years, many people, because they wanted a nice life, they wanted the community, they wanted it all set up for them so they could come and meditate and sit by the river and have all the satsang and eat the lunches and, you know, all of that. Many people came and left because after a while you can take so much. And then Divine Mother says, okay, do something. Serve me. I have something for you to do. Something not for me, but for you to grow. And when Divine Mother asks us to do something, Yogananda said, his highest woman disciple said, say yes and make it snappy. Why? Why? That seems like a silly teaching. Say yes and make it snappy, because our mind will give us all the reasons if we don't quick say yes of why we shouldn't say yes. Oh, but I have to pay that bill, and oh, my mother, or oh, my child, or oh, my job, or oh, that. And then that opportunity to serve God drifts away, and it might not come back again. That's why she said, make it snappy to say yes. There's a story, I'm not going to read this, but this is from The Touch of Joy from Jyotish and Devi. And she tells this story in this book of this man who had a near-death experience. He had a near-death experience. Of course, you've all read about those. People are near death, their soul leaves their body, and they experience cosmic consciousness or other things. They experience God. They experience themselves as one with God. They experience pure love. They experience their essence without this body, even for a few moments. Even if they're on the operating table or something happens and their soul leaves the body. And then they have to go through this life review where God asks them in the form of whoever they are familiar with. It could be Krishna, it could be Master, it could be Christ, it could be a relative. But they have them go through this past life that they just lived, and they see from the other person's viewpoint, from the other person's standpoint, what their actions have done to them, whether it be good or bad, what harsh words were said, whatever, how we've hurt other people. That person, we have to experience in our own selves what they felt. And so it's a lesson. It's a lesson for us that what we say, what we do, what we think, our actions, how they affect those around us. It's very powerful. We're powerful beings. And so then you get healed once you know how you've hurt somebody else or felt somebody else's anguish. But also, we often think of ourselves as little, as just, who am I? What can I give to this world? What can I do to serve? I'm do nothing. I'm just this person. And you look around, you see all these people, they really chant and they really give talks and they write books and they're out there doing all this thing. What can I do? Well, Davy tells this story. It just really touched me. There was this man who experienced this near-death experience, but he was in a car accident, a very serious car accident in California. And there were cars all over, they were crashed, there were people that were injured very seriously, and some people had died, and he left his body during this time. He also died, and he came back to tell the story, but he left his body. And he felt, when he went through this period of confusion, leaving his body and not knowing where he was, and then all of a sudden there was this light. There was this beautiful light. And where was it coming from? It was coming from a car that was not involved in the accident. Some car had stopped, and the person in the car prayed for these people. And this light was pouring from her car. She just stopped so she could pray for the people in the accident. And he felt her prayer. And immediately he felt this calm come over him and this deep sense of peace. And he knew he was going to be all right. And so he did come back. And he realized that that soul who was praying was serving God to the very best of her ability. No one knew her. No one would ever pat her on the back and say, what a great person you are. No one would even know. But in all of her humility, she loved God and she had a spiritual life that was strong and she cared about other people. She stopped her car and just started praying for these people. And this man experienced that prayer. And he said, prayer works. It absolutely works. Don't diminish what power you have within you to be a channel for God's love and light. Don't diminish yourself. Don't be so, oh, I can't do that. I'm not strong enough. I have no influence. We're children of God and everyone is equal. And we all have a song to sing in this world. And we all have a spark of the infinite. And we're all that beautiful light. And how are we ever going to know that unless we share that light? How are we ever going to know that unless we become that light? And we're an active instrument for that light in this world, in any way that God wants you to do it. Any way. Very silently, very humbly. And we have to know that God is waiting for us just to say yes, just to pray, just to say, I want to serve you, God. And maybe sometimes he asks you to do things that are big, or he gives you tests that are overwhelming. And you think, oh, why did I say yes to that? Because you're trembling and you're scared, and maybe you're teaching a class for the first time and you're just trembling. But you find out if you say yes, that what comes through is joy, like Swamiji, like that underlying joy, and you're touching souls. You're doing the work of God. You're doing what he is asking you to do. You're serving him humbly. And you're just saying yes to whatever he wants you to do. Cook a meal, speak, write a book, be spiritual, pray for people, do the online tech stuff, do whatever God asks you to do. Raise your children with kindness, compassion, and love. give them the spiritual teachings when they're young so that they know. They don't have to go through their whole life like we did and figure it out. I'm just going to close by saying that in the beginning of Ananda, seriously, there was nothing there, and two men would come to the land that we bought, the Swamiji bought in Northern California, nothing there. And they would come up every winter and they would just build a little temple and they would pray. And then he decided, this one man, Benai, who was Haridas's partner, he decided, well, we need money. We need money to build this community. He didn't say, oh, it's not spiritual. No, he decided that he was going to start industries, very basic industries, so that people could come and they could involve themselves in the industry and they could get money and they could build the community inch by inch by inch. There was no self-serving energy in this man. His name is Benai. He didn't say, oh, I'm going to go make money off this community. He still is he's a monk, and then he got married and he had a child and he still lives at Ananda. But that attitude of what can I do to serve? How can I help Master's work? How can I spread this vibration? And Master just put it in his mind. Okay, well, we need money. Okay, I'll do it. He didn't analyze it and say, that's spiritual, that's not spiritual, I can't do it, and nobody else is doing it, no one's going to know I'm doing it, this is really hard. Nothing. He says, oh, okay. So he started picking flowers and making jewelry out of the flowers and sold them in Sacramento. And that's what he did. That was the very first job at Ananda. And then look, this is what grows from soul to soul to soul to soul to soul. We need to tune into what God wants us to do. It's not going to happen. It's not on a silver platter. And it doesn't matter how old you are or how young you are or where you are in your life. God wants to use you as an instrument, I guarantee you, and that he will give you the strength and he will give you the power. He will give you the love and he will give you the guidance. He'll give you the way and you'll feel so much joy. He's not going to make it easy for you in the beginning because we're stuck in our ways of thinking of what we need to be able to proceed in this world. He'll make it a little difficult. He might take things away from you that you hold on to. He might give you things that you think you overwhelmingly can't take. But always stay steady. Meditate deeply every day and ask God at the end of your meditation, how can I serve you today? Is it through prayer? Is it through the healing prayer council? Is it through service? Should I go to the center? Should I help my mother? Whatever it is. Should I be kinder to my husband? Anything? How can I serve you today? And he will fill you with ideas because he doesn't have very many instruments. Not too many, We have a small group here. Even as big as Ananda is, a master's work is, and the guru's work is, when you think about it, there's 6 billion or 7 billion people in the world. How many of us are there? But the light, when the light is bright, the darkness disappears. And so we can make this light very bright on this planet. And we will change people through our own spiritual lives. No one will ever know. Maybe they will. Maybe they'll get you a pat on the back and say, oh, great book, you gave a wonderful talk, blah, blah, blah. But maybe they won't, but who knows? The guru knows. And then he will give you the promise that when you end your life and you've lived your life for him and you've said yes to him and you've served him, he said, I or one of the other gurus will be there when you die, and they will take you by the hand and take you to the other side. What a promise. But not only that, they're not going to wait until we die. If we reach out the hand, Master comes down and holds both, and he will help us through. So don't put it off. He's right here. We just have to know that. So those are just a few words I wanted to share, and we're very happy to be back. Happy Independence Day. And truly, what is independence? Independence is loving God. Independence is doing with your life what God wants you to do with it. That's true independence, spiritual independence. So Congratulations, everybody, for coming. And now we will have our